I have been married for over 40 years, and during that time I have achieved significant accomplishments in my career and life. My family has never lacked, and my beloved wife Nicole has always been well provided for. However, one day I began to notice some oddities. My wife, as it turned out, had been unfaithful to me. But the worst part of this story is how it changed everything around her. I am convinced that the consequences she faced were just. Let me tell you this story that I have been thinking about as I recall the events that took place exactly 1 year ago on one ordinary Monday. Throughout our life together, my wife always shared with me an interest in the intimate side of the relationship. After she retired, she was a school teacher and I was a transit police officer. Our passion may not have been as vivid as it was when we were younger, but in the beginning we often made love to each other, sometimes even several times a day. However, by that Monday, a year later, the memories of our last intimate moment had faded. Nicole attributed my state of apparent boredom, which she believed led to my depression and subsequent lethargy, to my lack of hobbies. However, I saw another reason. My depression was caused by a lack of intimacy. I suspected that she might be in a relationship on the side, so I decided to ask her a puzzling question. If she was abstinent, why didn't she feel longing like I did? And if she was in another relationship, when and how did it happen? On that particular Monday when she was dating, Nicole mentioned meeting her old high school friend Sylvia in town for a cup of coffee. However, I was highly skeptical. Making the decision to follow my wife, I went to her favorite coffee shop where I watched her and her friend. Everything seemed normal, even when she returned with her purchases. The date, time, and price were neatly written on each receipt, important details per an ex-cop used to detective work. Thursday nights were the decisive moment. While she went to pottery lessons, I was often in a nearby pub. From this vantage point, I could see her at her lessons through the workshop window. Despite the obvious signs of ordinariness, doubts continued to plague me. The following Wednesday, laundry day, brought an unexpected discovery. Nicole was in the habit of changing towels every week, alternating between blue and purple sets. This time, while helping her, I noticed a discrepancy. She handed me the blue towels and asked me to grab the purple ones from the closet. There seemed to be something wrong with that. As we were sorting out the bed, my attention was drawn to a white towel that was not part of our usual bath set and appeared to be in the wash. This white towel seemed unrelated to our daily rituals, but could have been a hint of a secret affair, perhaps even in our own home. I began to suspect that Nicole might have used these towels to hide evidence of her affair by avoiding leaving marks on the bedding. This disturbing thought began to haunt me. The cold March weather contrasted mockingly with the presence of those white towels that should have been put away long ago. Suddenly, a disturbing thought struck me. Had Nicole betrayed our vows right here within the confines of our home? The revelation hit me like a heavy anvil, shattering the last of my illusions. Lately, I'd been enjoying a peaceful sleep in our bed together, but now it seemed almost unbelievable that I wouldn't notice Nicole's intimate actions with someone next to me. The answer to the question that had been tormenting me came unexpectedly and was quite obvious. My fatigue and lack of energy were not the result of depression, it was something else. Interrupting my musings, Nicole asked if I was lost in my thoughts. I replied that I was pondering a mysterious puzzle. Things began to make sense when she nonchalantly advised me to keep my mind active before returning to my book and coffee. I decided to keep my thoughts to myself, assuring her that my mind was indeed active. A possible scenario began to take shape in my imagination. The suspect, her, injecting me with a dose of Rohypnol and then inviting an unknown lover into our home for secret meetings. Everything was becoming clear and obvious. About 3 months ago, our daily routine changed. At exactly 8:50 p.m., she serves me a glass of whiskey, and at 10:20 p.m. we take our medications. A mild sedative for her sleep, statins to lower my cholesterol, and multivitamins for both of us. She claims that taking the meds just before bedtime increases the effectiveness of rest. But she could have used that moment to slip something into my drink. I noted this, dismissing thoughts of the annoying neighbor. The circle of people involved in this mystery seemed to widen. Allow me to introduce myself. I am Fred Brown, former Inspector Brown. 2 years ago, at the age of 60, I retired after a career that began with failure and ended with a stint with the British Transport Police. I have served as a detective inspector for the past 5 years. Despite my efforts to stay fit, I am overcome by lethargy. However, if my suspicions are correct, things are about to change. I'm 5'11", I value honesty, and I don't tolerate cheating. Nicole, my wife, is about 5 feet 8 inches tall, has a tall, graceful and slender figure, small breasts, long dark hair, and green eyes. Our neighbors are the elderly couple on the right, who are rarely seen, and Kimberly with the seemingly obnoxious Billy on the left. But Nicole insists that Billy is a wonderful person. I perceive the situation differently than others. Julia, in my opinion a perfect woman, lost her first husband to cancer and now lives with a man I think is a jerk. For 5 years now, I've had a plausible theory about who, how, and where she might have been involved, but I have no concrete evidence. The mystery of the pills remains unsolved, but I continue to live by my own rules. Every Thursday night, Nicole leaves for her pottery class and returns around 9:30 p.m. One day, right after she left, I quickly put on a pair of needlepoint gloves taken from a box in the garage. I began searching my house, not knowing exactly what I was looking for. I was looking for something out of the ordinary, an element that didn't fit our daily lives. Often we don't notice small inconsistencies, but through the process of careful investigation, even minor oddities can point to a solution. My attention was primarily focused on the pills she was giving me under the guise of vitamins. I suspected that they were actually sedatives prescribed to her. My suspicions were confirmed when I scrutinized the pill's accompanying brochure, which warned of the dangers of taking them with alcohol. The next morning, after refusing to take them, I felt incredibly awake. Within hours, I felt a rush of youthfulness. I carefully surveyed every room, cleaning up any traces of my search. In the guest bedrooms, I found no obvious signs of intimacy. Clean, fresh sheets, though I was sure they hadn't been washed in a while. Unfortunately, there were no signs of cheating in our bedroom either, which only added to my disappointment. However, in a chaise lounge hidden in the back of the house, I found a gold wrapper from a ribbed condom, a brand I'd never used. Then it hit me. They had sex on that couch, using a towel to hide the evidence. Afterward, she threw the towel in the wash and returned to our bed. My marriage, in my opinion, was irretrievably damaged. I could have started the divorce process without even proving her infidelity, but I wanted more. The magnitude of her disrespect demanded an answer. Over the next few days, I silently strategized, noticing Nicole's indifference to my mood. Reflecting on it, I found myself feeling the same disgust for her. Nevertheless, remaining the only one with information about the impending divorce, I continued with my usual behavior. Every night I smiled, pretended to take pills, only to discreetly spit them out as soon as she turned away. One night, at exactly midnight, I was awakened by the vibration of her phone. I pretended to be asleep as she got out of bed and quietly slipped out of our room. The sound of the linen closet door opening and closing on the landing broke the silence. Despite my apparent bravado, a sense of unease swept over me. I considered going downstairs and catching her in the act, but hesitated. I didn't want to witness her betrayal by facing it head-on. Although the idea seemed tempting, I realized it would lead to complications. Then an idea struck me. I had a spare remote control for the home alarm system under my nightstand. Expecting her to turn off the system to let her lover in, I gave them a couple minutes on the device. Then I pressed the alarm button. The resulting chaos echoed through the house, disrupting their love plans. As I watched him hurriedly leave the house, I felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Even though Nicole had disabled the alarm system, I knew she knew nothing about it other than arming and disarming it. Later, I couldn't resist checking her actions. I asked Nicole, as if offhandedly, "You just chose the words I would use when caught in a compromising situation." She complained that she had to go downstairs to turn off the alarm. When I innocently asked what set it off, she countered that the alarm wouldn't go off if no one was in the house. I offered to go check it out, but she adamantly refused. She realized that my attempt to go downstairs in my current state could result in an ambulance call or worse. She was smart enough to realize the possible complications. Eventually, she informed me that she had already set the alarm, checked all the doors and windows, and ordered me to go to bed. I complied and enjoyed the quiet over the weekend. Nicole kept her composure over the weekend, but during her shower, I spent anxious minutes reading text messages on her phone. I used her backup password for the lock screen, knowing their arrogance would lead to a scheduled midnight date on Tuesday. By Sunday evening, they had both recovered from last night's events, and she made an appointment for Tuesday at 11:30. This coincided with my plans. I needed to talk to Kimberly on Monday. Hoping she would be home, I knocked on her door. "Hello, Fred." She greeted me with a smile, but her smile faded when she saw my serious and worried face. "What's the matter? You look so serious," she asked. "I'm sorry, but we need to talk, and we don't have much time," I replied. She agreed to meet me outside the library at 14:30. I began to summarize the situation to her. Kimberly was shocked, expressing her disappointment at Billy's actions. "How angry are you?" I asked cautiously. Her answer was restrained. She wanted to hurt them, but without taking excessive measures. I suggested a plan she liked: victimize them and trust the police to decide after our separation. I mentioned that the police might ask questions about our last conversation, and we decided to stick to the story about the spare printer cable. In the days that followed, I spent time with Kimberly, gradually beginning to appreciate her beauty, intelligence, and vengeful spirit. I shared my simple but effective plan with her, and she agreed to mull it over until Tuesday while I cleaned out my garage. In the meantime, I noticed signs that Nicole was preparing for another date at our house. I refrained from socializing with Kimberly to make it seem like business as usual that evening. Nicole brought me a large glass of whiskey and some pills. I pretended to swallow them, but actually spit them out so my toxicology test would be accurate. By 10 p.m., I was exhausted and went to bed, preparing myself for the events that were to unfold on Tuesday. A light doze enveloped me, and one thought kept running through my mind. How could she do this to me after almost 40 years of marriage and 2 children? She had betrayed me, and even under our mutual roof, by sedating me. After about a quarter of an hour, I felt calmer. I noticed her lying in bed next to me and decided to continue pretending to be lifeless, even as she checked on me. Then she left for the bathroom, and I heard the sounds of showering and brushing my teeth, followed by the flushing of the toilet. At this point, I took the sedative I had saved earlier and continued my role. At 11:30, Nicole's phone on the bedside table vibrated. I sighed lightly, as if something had alarmed me, and then froze again and slowed my breathing. She left the room to take the call, leaving her phone behind. I barely held back a smile when her phone rang again. It was a text from Kimberly asking about Billy banging on our bathroom door. I didn't have Nicole's number on my phone, which confused me a little. Shortly after that, my phone rang. It was Kimberly. I didn't answer it, pretending to be asleep. Quietly making my way downstairs, I stopped at the partially open kitchen door. I stood outside the door, listening to the intimate sounds that made me both disgusted and hateful at the same time. What have I done to deserve this? The question echoed in my head. If she didn't love me, she could have just walked away. But why drag this arrogant man into this? Holding back my anger, I grabbed the rolling pin from the kitchen countertop, ready to act. By chance, she did me a favor by loudly shouting to her lover not to stop. Seizing the moment, I stormed into the room, yelling for him to get away from my wife. Under the influence of the drugs, I began to lose consciousness, but continued to fake it to complete my plan. Meanwhile, Julia continued her story. Billy brought her a drink and a vitamin pill similar to the ones my wife had been given. After taking them, Julia threw up in the bathroom. When her husband didn't return and didn't answer her call, she looked out the window and saw him at the patio door, looking out at our sunroom. Concerned, she texted Nicole and called me, but was ignored. Alarmed, Julia went outside and witnessed her husband's infidelity. She filmed the encounter until I intervened. I may have been drunk and mistakenly thought my wife was being attacked. I honestly don't remember what I was doing at the time because I was really out of it. At the moment, Billy hit her head. Julia stopped filming and called emergency services, carefully describing what was happening. At the hospital, the doctor and uniformed police officers suggested that I might have been intoxicated and demanded a blood test. Dizziness and fatigue overwhelmed me, but concern for my wife dominated my thoughts. The doctor reassured me by informing me that she was talking to the police, and I lost consciousness again. When I next woke up at the hospital, they were ready to take my blood for analysis. I nodded in agreement, vaguely saying to the doctor, "Go ahead, do what you need to do. I don't have anything worth hiding." He took the sample and I went back to sleep. About 9 o'clock in the morning, I woke up and saw a young policeman at the door. He asked me politely, "Are you all right, sir?" "I think so," I answered, though I had no idea why I was here. "I'll let the boss explain everything. It's beyond me," he added. A nurse came in shortly after, offering me tea and toast and checking my vital signs. The officer, meanwhile, spoke quietly into his radio, updating me on my condition. After the nurse promised to bring a late breakfast and left, an officer approached my bunk. He informed me that the supervisor would be arriving soon on another case and asked if I was willing to wait. I smiled, replying, "Paradise as it was," with an acknowledgement of the inevitable consequences. The officer smirked back, appreciating my professionalism. Later, during breakfast and conversation over a beer, we were discussing England's disappointing performance in Australia. The officer mentioned that my supervisor would be arriving soon for questioning at the police station. I realized that I had been arrested on suspicion of assault with actual bodily harm. When the investigator introduced himself, he emphasized the seriousness of the charges and made sure I was aware of the possible consequences. He then asked me to recount the events of the previous night. I explained the facts, how I went to bed tiredly after my wife brought me drinks and pills, and suddenly woke up to find my wife not around. The noise downstairs made me act impulsively. I intervened, not knowing that the man I had assaulted was my neighbor, Mr. Billy Miller. The investigator also informed me that my wife had been arrested for pinning the man to the ground while the paramedics were taking us away. I expressed my sincere outrage at this. During the interview, I checked with the investigator for details regarding Billy. He revealed that Billy turned out to be my wife's lover, and together they had conspired to keep us both drugged for the past 3 months. They passed off prescription drugs as vitamins, potentially harming us. The investigation brought new and frightening revelations. A conspiracy between Billy and my wife to keep us drugged while they conducted their business was revealed. The police found compelling evidence of their malice, charging them with poisoning and conspiracy to commit fraud. Both faced serious prison terms. When Billy was discharged from the hospital and sent to the police station, we both appeared in court. My wife was given 2 years for abuse of office and another 2 for committing fraud. Interestingly, both sentences are scheduled to run concurrently. As for Billy, he got 3 years for malicious use of drugs, given Kimberly's lifelong liver damage, and another 5 years for fraud. Surprisingly, Kimberly actively assisted the police, scrutinizing his every move. Despite all that had happened, there was a bright side to Billy. The prison service doctors were confident that Billy's speech would normalize after his release. However, his future employment prospects can only be guessed at. With most of his assets confiscated under the Proceeds of Crime Act, not even his old school friends dared to offer him a job in finance. The police recognized Kimberly and I as victims and exonerated me of the personal injury charge. After all, it was my assailant's partner who had drugged me. The national press and old acquaintances looked on with joyous frenzy, while Kimberly and Billy faced relentless slander from all sides. Not a single commentator found excuses for their behavior. Kimberly evoked sympathy with her charm, leaving the public wondering about Billy's decision to leave her for another. Our children attended the court hearings. I couldn't sit next to them until I testified and was released as a witness. My 20 minutes on the witness bench was filled with compelling forensic testimony, including blood tests, Kimberly's liver damage, vitamin containers, text messages, and financial checks. The disclosures in their text messages almost admitted everything. Despite Billy's initial confidence in his own mind, the truth came out in court. My daughter decisively severed all ties with her mother, sending her a letter to the prison prohibiting any contact with the convicted poisoner. My son, in deep distress, asked me if I would mind his visiting her in prison to hear her side of the story. I advised him to go, but warned him of possible disappointment. A few weeks later, he called me, confirming his disappointment. Kimberly justified her actions, blaming everything on the idiot who seduced her in a moment of vulnerability, shifting blame and portraying herself as a victim of manipulation. She lost her dignity, reputation, husband, daughter, son, and grandchildren because of her affair with a criminal. I filed for divorce from Kimberly during the investigation and the sale of the house to fairly compensate for the damage to our property. She had to hire an attorney for her defense, and I sued her for emotional trauma caused by her malicious actions. By the time she is released, all she will have left is her pension. Kimberly, frustrated in her marriage to Billy, who coveted half of their home, discovered that the house was held in trust for their twins from her first marriage. She retained the right to live in the house while Billy faced an uncertain future. Kimberly and I became hapless victims of our despicable spouses, and when the pressures of the media became overwhelming, I retreated to a secluded villa in the south of France. Kimberly also found refuge in a similar villa at a friend's house. A trust developed between us that grew from friendship to love. Eventually, I moved in with Kimberly and we became life partners. Our children and grandchildren have built a warm relationship, and I appreciate how Kimberly compensated me for what her husband took from me. She proved to be a passionate partner, and I wondered how Billy could give up such a woman for Nicole. Now we take the right vitamins every night, and Kimberly has quit drinking to heal her liver. I rejoice in every day I spend with her by my side. Kimberly has survived the loss of her husband to cancer, raised 2 children alone, and faced betrayal, but she is able to love with all her heart while accepting my imperfections.
Thank you so much for watching my video and your time. Please subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button.